Everyone, Vamix here today. I wanted to do an unscripted video just kind of giving my thoughts on how I feel about Modern Warfare Zombies now that we've had, 5 updates, the story's concluded, we know what we're getting for Season 6, so I feel like now is a good time to kind of just do a little review, just going over some notes I have. I have a list of things I like, things I dislike, and then things that I feel kind of mixed on. Now, my history with this mode, just to go over briefly. When this was announced, I was kind of excited. I wasn't like super pumped about the next Zombies game after Vanguard, even though I definitely didn't dislike Vanguard as much as most people, but I still, was soured on it. And the idea of DMZ Zombies was appealing to me, even without like a PvP element to it. And I also felt like, as someone who was a big fan of Outbreak, I was also interested in seeing like what the next evolution of that would be, even though I would say this is more of a pivot from what Outbreak was at its core, rather than being like a true successor. But it definitely does scratch a similar itch for me, in terms of being, big open world map and clearing as many objectives as possible kind of deal. So when the game launched, I was a big fan of it from the get-go, and we'll kind of go over a lot of the things I like was something that, I was introduced to at the very beginning and, just enjoyed throughout the game's life. And even going into Season 1, I was pretty pumped about the content we got in that, because I was really enjoying the new Dark Ether Rift. It seemed like a great idea to me, and the worm boss that we had in the story missions was really cool, and I really enjoyed the secret red worm fight they had added. And I was a little disappointed that the Act 4 mission they added didn't have a bunch of little missions you had to do in the game first, similar to how Acts 1, 2, and 3 did, which was something I enjoyed. I did like having all those missions to do to then get to a story mission and then, see that cutscene. And, Act 4 was just kind of, do this mission and you're done, which was fine because I liked the content that was there. I enjoyed doing the little, unmarked Easter egg quests that everyone had to kind of solve together to unlock the regular Dark Ether Rift. That way we could get the new schematics. And I was just really kind of enjoying that. And I was really hyped for Season 2 because we had the new Warzone map coming out, and people were kind of talking and saying that, oh, like, this should be, added into MWZ as well. And like, there was no confirmation of that. Like, to be fair, we were kind of just like following leaks at the time, and unfortunately, it turned out to not be the case. And Season 2 launched, and it just was another Dark Ether Rift. And we didn't get a new boss fight either. We then started this trend of, during the mid-season of zombie updates, we would get a Dark Ether Rift, we get a new story cutscene, we get those 3 new schematics to unlock, and just kind of like an electric mimic or an electric mangler, or a disciple, and just like nothing really too crazy, until we arrived in the final season, where we got the Entity boss fight, which was phenomenal. I really, really enjoyed that boss fight a lot, actually. And the secret version of it, giving this amazing blueprint reward, I was super happy with that. So I finally stopped being so sour on the mode, which is basically how I was feeling for most of its main life cycle. I'd say from Seasons 2 all the way up through 4, even a little bit going into Season 1, because that Season 1 Reloaded update was pretty subpar. It just added one of the world bosses to it, so wasn't super thrilled about that. So anyway, that was just kind of like how I felt about the mode over the year, and now I just want to kind of go into what were the things that I liked and disliked and felt mixed on. So starting off with the likes, something I really enjoy about this is the stash loadout schematic system. I really like the idea of, starting with nothing, going into the map, getting that normal progression for your player, but also earning the schematics by doing contracts or going to a dark ether rift and being able to craft those outside of game and be able to find loot like that and then store it outside the game in your stash as well. The stash definitely was always way too small for a majority of this game. And now you can even do the entities Dark Ether Rift and unlock, another 10 slots. I would prefer it to be just added to everybody's stash, but, it's still nice to have something, at least. And that was just a system I enjoyed. Like, I just liked being able to unlock all these things and craft them and save up the kind of loot I wanted to the next match I went in. I also really enjoyed, I kind of touched on it earlier, but I really enjoyed the worm boss fight. I enjoyed the red one in particular, just kind of you had to do that little USB secret Easter egg and go around the whole map finding those points, and you could link up with other players and beat this red worm, and the rewards are pretty good because I believe you get the triple pack crystal, the gold wrench blueprint, and also the scorcher schematic. So that was really nice. Good reward, so definitely worth doing, and it was a decent fight. I feel the same way about the entity. I think the entity was honestly like the biggest highlight of this game for me. Is that boss fight was amazing. It had 2 phases, and there was a secret, more difficult version, like with a great reward too. So I was just really pumped off of that fight. And boss fights is something I want to kind of touch on later in the video. But for now, the next thing that I was a really big fan of is the 24-player lobbies. I enjoy being in this large map with a ton of other people all playing zombies with each other at the same time. I think that's really fun. I enjoy that we can, come across a random other squad of 3 and even like join up together, or you can go in solo and find some people, or you can even, join up with some people for a little bit and then leave the squad, and then head out. I just really enjoyed that system. It's like a nice little social aspect to zombies that we've never really seen before. Aside from that, next I would say I really enjoyed the perk selection. I think it's solid. I don't miss Meal Kick. I will say I'm not a big Meal Kick fan. I like the other things it did for us in Cold War, but I don't really care for having 3 weapons, so I wasn't really upset about missing out on that. But we basically have, the whole Cold War setup, which is nice. Aside from that, I really enjoyed the Wonder Weapon selection. We got the Ray Gun, we got the Wonder Waff, this new Scorcher, and the VR11 made a return, and they actually made it a lot more useful. And I think enjoyable to use. Now, just being able to turn zombies into mercs and mercs into zombies, and repairing vehicles, it's especially useful during the escort missions, especially when you do it in the Dark Ether as well. And you even get a speed boost when you run around with it. I, really am definitely like a big fan of what they did with the VR11. It's a cool looking Wonder Weapon, so I was happy to see it kind of shine. And the Scorcher, while, using it for damage is fine, it's the mobility tool aspect of that I really enjoy. I just like being able to boost and fly around the map, as much as I want without having to worry about a vehicle or vehicle health and things like that. Next, I wish was in at launch, but I still, really enjoyed it ever since it came in, is containment levels. And this way, your operators get kind of like their own little bit of progression besides just having, their 3-plate vest, their self-revive, their kill streak, their grenades, etc., etc. And now you have another reason to grind contracts and make it out alive, not just quit, come back in with nothing, because you get discounts, you get more points to spawn with, you get armor to spawn with. It's just really nice bonuses, and I really enjoyed that part of character progression in this game. Next, I would say I want to highlight one enemy in the enemy pool in particular, and that is the Mega Bombs. I love the Mega Abominations. I think giant enemies are really fun. It's basically a mini boss fight, just like wandering around in the tier 3 zone. I think they're fun to fight. I think they're not too difficult, not too easy. and I just, really enjoyed that part of the enemy spawn pool. And then finally, for the likes I have, I wanted to touch on was I just like the new Damned theme. It is Damned 6, I believe, and I think it slaps. That's it. That's all I really gotta say about that. Next, I want to talk about things I feel more mixed on. So these are things about this mode that I don't particularly dislike, but I don't really love them either. So first would be the Dark Ether Rift itself. I am kind of hit or miss on these. The first one kind of guarantees you schematic drops, and that kind of makes it kind of loses any reason to go back in and do it again unless you're helping someone else do it. The later Dark Ether zones, they got rid of that, and so made it kind of an RNG for a drop. I know some people don't enjoy that, but for me personally, it at least gives me a reason to run the Rift again. Because, once I have all three schematics, there really isn't any reason for me to just farm sigils and go back in. Unless, again, I'm helping someone else get the schematics. I do think visually, they're all pretty great. The skyboxes are beautiful, especially the ones that have the Earth just like out there in the sky. I think that's really, really cool. The Unstable Rift, I want to give a shout out to in particular. Now, I don't like the system in place where only one team can go in at a time. However, doing the actual Rift, I think, is pretty fun. It's basically like 5 waves in a little confined survival map space. And then all your cooldowns get refreshed, which is really nice because some of them are ridiculously long. Next, I would like to talk about the story. The story was something that I personally definitely was hooked on in the beginning. Seeing Requiem dead around that table was intriguing to me. Meeting this new character, seeing Ravnov back was exciting. The part where the story lost me was, I believe it is the Season 4 cutscene, where Ravnov reveals to Ava that she is the child of him and Maxis, and it was against her will, and it was just kind of like weird, and I wasn't a really big fan of that that story beat. Still not really a big fan of it, but it's all right. The end of the story was interesting, seeing whatever the hell that was in the mirror pull Ava through into what I'm guessing is Liberty Falls. I don't know if that's time travel or what, but definitely did intrigue me a little bit, even though I was kind of checked out by then of what was really going on. But yeah, the story hooked me at the beginning, kind of lost me, got me a little bit back in the end, but I am just excited for Black Ops 6 in general, so. Next, I would say, I kind of touched on it earlier when I mentioned the enemy pool, when I was talking about the Mega Bombs, but I am mixed on the enemy pool. Like, I like Manglers, I like Mimics, like I said, I like the Mega Abominations, Armored Zombies are back and stuff, but I just kind of wish it had maybe 1 or 2 unique enemies, because it is just kind of, a lot of Cold War enemies and a giant Cold War enemy mixed in together. And I feel like, even Vanguard had its own suite of enemies. It only had 3, kind of unique enemies. I guess the red exploding sprinting zombies weren't really unique because of the Tormentors in Cold War. But we did have our other 2 enemies that, are unique to Vanguard. And, love them or hate them, that is nice that it has its own thing. And I kind of wish MWZ had more of that, because we don't really have, like, the little crawlers that kind of, either hang off the belly of the Mega Abomination, or they, are in, like, the Ether Nest. Now, next I want to kind of touch on is the operator slots. Now, I'm not opposed to a system like this, and I don't mind it. Honestly, the only thing I really don't like is that we have to buy bundles to get more slots. Because I think 3 is fine, but I'd rather be able to unlock them than purchase them. And then speaking of The microtransactions for zombies is another thing I'm mixed on. You can get ether wrenches and wonder weapon cases and ether pack-a-punch crystals and things simply by buying bundles, or they're in battle pass tiers, or another example is pre-ordering Black Ops 6. You get 3 ray gun cases. I say that I'm mixed on it because it's not like a huge deal to me. I don't mind that much, even though it's technically kind of pay to win, but like, I don't really get that angry about it, so that's kind of why I have it in the mixed tier. But yeah, that's all I want to talk about for that group. And then finally, I just wanted to touch upon my dislikes for the game. So something that I was originally mixed on, but now I definitely know I'm not a big fan of, is the time limit. Now, originally, for what I was hoping the game was kind of leaning more towards, and I'll get into that in a bit, I was kind of okay with the time limit because I was kind of understanding that this was supposed to be an extraction zombies game. So the idea was to, sure, you load in a week this game, but you spend that game getting a bunch of gear, or, you know, 2 or 3 more games, getting a bunch of loot, putting it in your stash box, and then you do your big thing for the final game, which, again, I'll get into in a little bit of what I was hoping, you know, the whole point of that would be. But unfortunately, the stash was either too small, or there wasn't really any end game to kind of, you know, work towards. That's the next thing I wanted to touch on. Is the big killer for me in my enjoyment of MWZ for a long time is just a lack of endgame, a lack of real overall objective to go for. And, you know, even in Vanguard Zombies, even in zombie games I don't like, there is always, you know, a round-based mode, and at the very least, there is survive as long as you can. And that's, you know, at a basic level, something I enjoy doing. And I kind of wish that MWZ had something like that. I always was hoping for, I don't know, maybe some type of onslaught thing and MP maps, maybe something similar to the Void objective from Vanguard Zombies, where you can just, you know, gear up, teleport in, and just survive, you know, grind your gun camos or something like that. But unfortunately, it's just never something we got. Only other zombies mode really received was Horde Point, and that was in multiplayer. So I feel like the game definitely really suffered from that lack of endgame, and that's really kind of what stopped me from coming back and playing more for a long time. And then some other things I don't really like about MWZ is I really do not like the 3-player queue limit. We have 6-man squads. I've seen people glitch into my lobby before and have a 6-man party. You can even party up in the zombies menu. It just won't let you queue. I just wanted them to change it so I could bring in 5 other friends. And, you know, being able to play as a group of 6 in zombies is appealing to me, and it's something I want to do. And I was really kind of hoping that MWZ would, you know, make that happen. But unfortunately, you know, even now with Season 6, we're still stuck with just squads of 3. And you gotta kind of get lucky and try to queue together with 2 new groups and hope to get into the same server, which I have done before, but it's definitely not practical. Kind of touched on it earlier, talking about how we didn't get the new map in Season 2, but only having one main map, I think, really is unfortunate. I would have loved to see any of the other Warzone maps, or the maps that are in DMZ, that's where I mainly played them, show up in Modern Warfare Zombies. Just to have another locale to be in to do the contracts. Even if the contracts didn't change, that would have been nice. And speaking of, I would have loved to see some new contracts in the game as well. It's really unfortunate that we never got to see any more of those added in. But again, if we did have some kind of change in locale, that would have been fine for me. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. So overall, as you can probably tell, most of my dislikes with MWZ isn't really with the core mode outside of the end game. It's a lack of substantial updates. And this kind of segues into what I wanted MWZ to be, what I was hoping for, and what was set up for me in my head during Season 1, which was boss fights. I was really into the idea of MWZ potentially being this boss fight gallery where the whole point was to get all this gear and get set up so you could do these awesome boss fights, and beat them and get their cool rewards and challenge yourself. Because that's something I always liked in Easter eggs, traditionally in zombies, I love having a boss fight at the end. I think boss fights are super fun, super rewarding. I'm a big Souls player. I know those boss fights aren't really the same as they are in COD Zombies, but that's just a part of games that I like in general. That kind of challenge. So I was really hoping that MWZ would continue down what it set up in Season 1 and kind of give us a new boss to fight in each of the Dark Ether rifts, or even like a secret one like the Red Worm out in the overworld. And unfortunately, we just never got that until Season 5, which is why I enjoyed that update so much, because the Entity boss fight is genuinely great. But I really did just, always wish that, hopefully maybe next season, but, never came to be. Unfortunately, we kind of just got what I would call some lackluster updates, because at the end of the day, these new schematics are cool, and, I enjoy them, and I unlocked most of them, but why am I unlocking them? That's a question that would always pop in my head. Is like, why am I earning these? Why am I unlocking these? Because if I'm just doing it so I can have an easier time running contracts, that isn't what's fun to me. What's fun to me is, starting from nothing, getting powerful, getting all my gear, and then taking it into something that's genuinely difficult, which in this case is either the Red Worm or the Entity fight. And if we had 3 more boss fights on that level, I think I would be singing MWZ's praises a little more than I am now. So I just wanted to close on what I would ideally want to see for an MWZ 2, if that ever were to happen. I know now we're gearing into round-based zombies again, and maybe even Outbreak, someday in the future. But personally, for me, what I would really like to see in an MWZ 2 is, more boss fights, obviously. A void objective. I'd like to see more than just one main map to play on. Or at the very least, not just a Warzone map, but kind of trick the map out to be a little more zombified, a little more interesting than what we have here. Because the only really zombified thing we get is a couple Ethereum canisters, and then the ether nests and the little dark ether storm tornadoes. Even if it was one big dark ether map, kind of like how the rifts look. But yeah, my main points for a sequel, if it ever were to happen, would be more boss fights, hopefully more main maps, more contracts, things like that. That would be something I'd actually enjoy working towards and building up my characters for, rather than what feels like almost nothing. But, those 2, good boss fights, one I'd even call great, that, I can go do, and I do like to go do, on my own time. But I do just wish, we had a couple more of those in the game. So anyway, that is my thoughts on MWZ and what I would hope to see if we ever come back to a mode like this. If you have any thoughts on MWZ you'd like to share, or, things you agree or disagree with me on, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching.